Hi guys, as you requested, chapter 4 of Brave New World. Bear with me, I am going to try my best, and I really hope that you have your cell phone away and you're really paying attention. You don't have to watch my face, you can just listen to my voice. And I hope I do a little bit of a better job than the other one, but that's a professional reader, so you just might be used to my voice. Chapter 4, Part 1. The lift was crowded with men from the Alpha changing rooms, and Lenina's entry was greeted by many friendly nods and smiles. She was a popular girl and, at one time or another, had spent a night with almost all of them. They were dear boys, she thought, as she returned their salutations. Charming boys. Still, she did wish that George Edsall's ears weren't quite so big. Perhaps he'd been giving just a spot too much parathyroid in meter 328. Meter 328 would have been where he is in a test tube and they might have given him too much something. So every speculation of why a person is so different in this society, it has to do with how they were created in the test tube. And looking at Benito Hoover, she couldn't help remembering that he was really too hairy when he took his clothes off. Turning, with eyes and a little saddened by the recollection of Benito's curly blackness, she saw in the corner the small, thin body, the melancholy face of Bernard Marx. Bernard! She stepped up to him. I was looking for you. Her voice rang clear above the hum of the mounting lift. The others looked round curiously. I wanted to talk to you about our New Mexico plan. Out of the tail of her eye, she could see Benito Hoover gaping with astonishment. The gape annoyed her. Surprised I shouldn't be begging to go with him again, she said to herself. And then aloud, and more warmly than ever, I'd simply love to come with you for a week in July, she went on. Anyhow, she was publicly proving her unfaithfulness to Henry. Fanny ought to be pleased, even though it was Bernard. That is, Lenina gave him her most deliciously significant smile, if you still want to have me. Bernard's pale face flushed. What on earth for? She wondered, astonished, but at the same time touched by this strange tribute to her power. Bernard's pale face flushed. What on earth for? She wondered, astonished, but at the same time touched by this strange tribute to her power. Hadn't we better talk about this somewhere else? He stammered, looking horribly uncomfortable. As though I'd been saying something shocking, thought Lenina. He couldn't look more upset if I made a dirty joke, like asked him who his mother was or something like that. I mean, with all these people about. He was choked with confusion. Lenina's laugh was frankly and wholly unmalicious. Oh, how funny you are, she said. And she quite genuinely did think him funny. You'll give me at least a week's warning, won't you? She went on in another tone. I suppose we take the Blue Pacific rocket. Does it start from the charging T-tower, or does it start from Hempstead? Before Bernard could answer, the lift came to a standstill. Roof! Called in a creaking voice. The liftman was a small, simian creature, dressed in the black tunic of an Epsilon minus semi-moron. Roof! He flung open the gates. The warm glory of the afternoon sunlight made him start and blink his eyes. A roof! He repeated in a voice of rapture. He was as though suddenly joyfully awakened from the dark, annihilating stupor. Roof! He smiled up with a kind of doggedy, expectant admiration into the faces of his passengers. Talking and laughing together, they stepped out into the light. The liftman looked after them. Roof? He said once more, questioningly. Then the bell rang, and from the ceiling of the lift a loudspeaker began, very softly and yet very imperiously, to issue its commands. Go down, it said. Go down. Floor 18, go down, go down. Floor 18, go down, go. So I'm going to take a break for here just for you to understand. I'm not sure what you can infer about what's going on here, but Lenina is in an elevator with just about every guy she slept with, except for Bernard. Everyone thinks Bernard is a loser. So why would Bernard be at least being spoken to by Lenina, who is just unbelievably gorgeous, and they all know it? So I guess in your terms, her body's banging. She looks amazing. Every single man in that place has had her, and they would do it again, but you don't do that in this place. And also talking to Bernard about a um, a date that they're going to be going on. That itself is just making sure that she's telling herself that I don't really like Henry Foster enough to like date him for 4 months. And remember, Henry's dating her for 4 months too, but she's kind of being seclusive with him. And I don't think that he's being seclusive with her. The Roof character is an Epsilon. They really can't say many words. And what they can say is just what they're supposed to do. He is super excited to see this roof, right? He's like, roof! He gets super, super, super excited. And he expectantly, because that's what's supposed to happen, is he's supposed to look at his passengers like they are gods and let them walk all over him. And that's just how that caste system works. And that's just an example of it. The liftman slammed the gates, touched a button, and instantly dropped back into the droning twilight of the well, the twilight of his own habitual stupor. It was warm and bright on the roof. The summer afternoon was drowsy with the hum of passing helicopters, and the deep drone of the rocket planes, hastening, invisible, through the bright sky 5 or 6 miles overhead, was like a caress on the soft air. Bernard Marx drew in a deep breath. He looked up into the sky and round the blue horizon and finally down at Lenina's face. Isn't it beautiful? His voice trembled a little bit. She smiled at him with an expression of the most sympathetic understanding. It's simply perfect for obstacle golf, she answered rapturously. And now I must fly, Bernard. Henry gets cross if I keep him waiting. 1 minute, Tommy's here. Henry gets cross if I keep him waiting. Let me know in good time about the date. And waving her hand, she ran away across the wide, flat roof towards the hangars. Bernard stood watching. In the retreating twinkle of the white stockings and the sunburnt knees, vivaciously bending and unbending again and again, and the softer rolling of those well-fitted corduroy shorts beneath the bottle green jacket, his face wore an expression of pain. I should say she was pretty, said a loud and cheery voice just behind him. Bernard stared and looked around. The chubby red face of Benito Hoover was beaming down at him, beaming with a manifest of cordiality. Benito was notoriously good-natured. People said of him that he could have got through life without even touching Soma. The malice of bad tempers from which other people had to take holidays never afflicted him. So taking a holiday means taking Soma. Reality for Benito was always sunny. And pneumatic too, and how. Pneumatic means that she has like an hourglass shape and she's like big on top and perfect on the bottom and teeny tiny waist. And then in another tone, but I say, he went on, you look glum. What you need to do is take a gram of Soma. Diving into his right-hand trouser pocket, Benito produced a file. 1 cubic centimeter cures 10 gloomy. Hey, but I say. Bernard had suddenly turned and rushed away. Benito stared after him. What's the matter with that fellow? He wondered, and shaking his head, decided that the story about the alcohol having been put into this poor chap's blood surrogate, it must be true. It must have touched his brain, I suppose. He put away the Soma bottle and, taking out a packet of sex hormone chewing gum, stuffed a plug into his cheek and walked slowly away towards the hangars, ruminating. So this sex surrogate, the sex hormone chewing gum thing that he's taking, it kind of gives him the pleasure of an orgasm. So he's eating this and then he's getting that. It's a weird book. Henry Foster had had his machine wheeled out of its lockup when Lenina arrived and was already seated in the cockpit, waiting. 4 minutes late, was all his comment as she climbed in beside him. He started the engines and threw the helicopter screws into gear. The machine shot vertically into the air. Henry accelerated. The humming of the propeller shrilled from a hornet to wasp, from a wasp to mosquito. The speedometer showed that they were rising at the best part of 2 kilometers a minute. London diminished beneath them. The huge table-topped buildings were no more, in a few seconds, than a bed of geometrical mushrooms sprouting from the green of park and garden. In the midst of them, thin-stalked a taller, slender fungus. The charging T-towers lifted towards the sky a disk of shining concrete. A T-tower is for the actual, like, their god, right? That's why they're making like how they're doing a T is they're going on their belly and they're doing a T, and it's a capital T, like I would for Tommy. Let's continue. Like the vague torsos of fabulous athletes, huge fleshy clouds lolled on their blue air above their heads. Out of one of them suddenly dropped a small scarlet insect, buzzing as it fell. Hey, there's the red rocket, said Henry. Just came in from New York, looking at his watch. 7 minutes behind time, he added and shook his head. These Atlantic services, they're really scandalously unpunctual. He took his foot off the accelerator. The humming of the screws overhead dropped an octave and a half. Back through the wasp and hornet to bumblebee, to shopfare, to stag beetle. The upward rush of the machine slackened off, and a moment later they were hanging motionlessly in the air. Henry pushed at the lever, and there was a click. Slowly at first, and faster, till it was circular mist before their eyes, and the propeller in front of them began to revolve. The wind of the horizontal speed whistled ever more shrilly in the stays. Henry kept his eye on the revolution counter, and when the needle touched 1200 mark, he threw the helicopter screws out of gear. The machine had enough forward momentum to be able to fly on its planes. This video is going to end in about like 30 seconds. So what I'd like you to do is just note that we have not got to part 2 yet, but we're on our way. I'm going to stop this video and then start from that moment. Thanks.